Hi everybody, I wanted to take about 3 minutes to demonstrate some of the visual metaphor work that I wanted to model for you all so you could see a model of the ways that you could work with a visual metaphor before, during, and in the midst of choosing visuals for your presentation for this week. So I'm asking everybody to storyboard their story this week and to choose the visuals that'll tell that story of either coming to choose education as a major or as a career path, or you can story how you've come to conceptualize yourself as a teacher, the kind of teacher that you want to become. So before we can actually begin the storyboard here, we have to start thinking back into our past about the kinds of stories we want to tell about ourselves. So for today, I am going to be working on telling the story of coming to be the kind of educator that I want to be. So I have collected some small stories that I think I could tell that would make that point clear to people, and they're from my life. So the details will need to be authentic and credible and somewhat surprising to my audience. So I've picked some fairly sticky stories. One from my childhood, about my parents letting me play with my brother and sisters and being really careful about the content that they gave us access to. One about a student in one of my fourth grade classrooms in New Haven Public Schools named Arlen, who drew really beautiful pictures but hated to write, and the challenge that created for me as a teacher then. One about my daughter Sadie, who's developmentally delayed, and the kinds of ways that's challenged my thinking about what it means to expect and have norms for what things should look like and how fast things should grow. And then there's a story I've got here about a student I had that had to change classrooms out of my classroom. So I've got these stories in my mind, and I've also jotted some notes about them, and then I'm going to move to thinking about a visual metaphor. And basically what that means, a metaphor is when you imply, when there's an implied connection between two things. Similes are the ones that we're super used to. The giraffe is as tall as a ladder. The gum is like silly putty. These are similes. Metaphors are when that connection is implied between two different things. So we want to start listing several different ones that we might try. So I'm going to think about the kind of educator I want to be. Could be a gardener, educator as gardener. So you can do this through similes, but then we're going to turn it into a metaphor with our thinking. Gardener, robot, that might be pretty sad. Deep sea diver. Another one. The kind of educator I want to be. Oh, I know I've done a cliff jumper. Kind of similar to the deep sea diver. But you can see where I'm going here. So then we move to deconstructing the metaphor. So I have to choose one to deconstruct, and that means we're breaking that metaphor, that thing that or person that we've selected over here into some different elements. We're thinking about objects, attributes, processes, and tasks. So if I take teacher as, and we'll make it gardener here, objects associated with gardening are plants and seeds and tools. Attributes, over time, dormancy, sensitive to elements, patience, hardworking, maybe even dirty. Processes would be seasons, cycles. There are several that we could come up with there. And tasks, things that the gardener does: observation, regular care, watering, feeding, leaving alone, protecting. I could make a long list there. So then I come back to my small stories and I think about the metaphor, and I start to attach some of the ideas of this metaphor over here to my stories. And I think about how this story can illustrate the fundamental elements that are necessary, like water, sun, and soil. Make those another color. I'll make them green because I'm working with that metaphor. Here, this story about Arlen. I got to think about that one for a little while. I'm not quite sure about that one right now. With my daughter Sadie, I would say some of the things that I could use the metaphor for there would be the elements and patience. Elements meaning wind, temperature, extremes, flood, drought, things that are beyond our control, and then patience and waiting to see. I might even be able to talk about dormancy in that story to use that. And this one was pretty easy for me. New place in the garden. We've got to move things. Plants sometimes have to move. Sometimes they're not in the right soil. Maybe they need to move to different light or be near other plants. So these are some of the ways these visual elements can be woven into the telling of my story. Now I can come back here and I can start to think about the visuals that I would curate to tell this story, or this set of stories. And so some of the ways that that might feed into my thinking are contrasting personal pictures or of my daughter Sadie, or of Arlen's student work, with some of the visuals that would make those connections to the metaphor that I'm talking about. So I will probably choose authentic pictures from my life of her. I will probably choose authentic pictures that I have from my life, like student work I've saved. But then I'll also probably choose some stock images that'll keep this visual theme to drive that point home. I might also think about time and how that'll factor in, and how I'll tell the stories. Will I tell them chronologically, or will I tell them out of order? But the most important thing for this week is how that might feed the pictures that I choose and the pictures that I download to share with you all, and how I'm thinking about that visual metaphor related to my stories. Hope this helped. And if you need some more help, I will certainly be around and available.